At my granddaughter's 15th birthday, barn 15th birthday, her father, who abandoned her as a baby, walked in with lawyers and demanded custody. He called her my burden while bragging about his mansion and money. I stayed calm, smiling through the pain. But when the judge heard my granddaughter speak, his face collapsed. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The lawyer's envelope trembled in my hands, its weight far heavier than the thin stack of papers inside. Custody petition. Jason Walker. After 15 years of raising my granddaughter alone, the man who had abandoned her with a scribbled note calling her my burden had resurfaced, demanding to reclaim the brilliant young woman she had become. At 67, I thought I had endured every form of betrayal life could conjure. I was wrong. That moment pulled me back to the night when all of this began, the night that carved a wound so deep it never fully healed. It was March 15, 2009. The phone shattered the silence at 2:47 a.m., that hour when bad news lurks in the shadows. My daughter Emily, only 27, had been struck by a drunk driver on her way home from her nursing shift. Dead on impact, they said. No suffering, as though that was meant to comfort me. Her husband Jason sobbed through the receiver, broken and disbelieving. She's gone, Maggie. Our Emily's gone. I held him at the funeral, his body trembling as he clutched 6-month-old Lily, his grief carved into hollow eyes. For a fleeting time, we leaned on one another, bound by loss. But grief has its own logic. Some fight their way through it. Others drown. Jason chose to drown. I am down to drown. And he nearly pulled Lily under with him. The drinking began almost immediately. Late nights bled into empty mornings. Bottles littered the floor where lullabies should have filled the air. I came as often as I could, bringing meals, scrubbing counters, rocking Lily to sleep. But every gesture was met with hostility. Stop trying to replace Emily, he snapped once, slurring through his grief. Lily doesn't need you hovering. I bit my tongue, telling myself he was just hurting. 3 months after Emily's death, I arrived for my usual visit and found the apartment door wide open, my chest tightening as dread washed over me. Inside was a battlefield. Spoiled food, sour bottles, the stench of neglect. My heart nearly stopped when I reached the nursery. Lily was in her crib, her tiny face crimson with exhaustion, her diaper soiled, her cries hoarse from hours of being ignored. Then I saw it, a note on the counter, Jason's handwriting scrawled across it. She's your burden now. I can't do this anymore. And with that, he was gone. No forwarding address, no calls, no trace of the man who had once promised my daughter forever. I stood in the wreckage of their home, holding a fragile baby who would never know her mother, and I felt both fury and an unexpected surge of relief. I would never allow him to hurt her again. The next morning, a weary-eyed social worker named Janet Morrison inspected the scene with practiced detachment. She had seen too much of humanity's failures to be easily shaken. How long has the father been gone? She asked, scribbling on her clipboard. Since yesterday morning, I said, bouncing Lily against my chest to quiet her sobs. But if I'm honest, he's been gone in every way that mattered for months. Janet studied me, her expression softened by a flicker of pity. We'll need to file abandonment paperwork. Given that you're her grandmother and there's no other immediate family, the question is simple. Are you prepared to take full custody? The words hung in the air like a challenge. Was I ready to start over at 52, to return to sleepless nights, diaper changes, the relentless demands of raising a child? My body ached, my spirit sagged, but when I looked down into Lily's impossibly blue eyes, the same shade Emily carried through her too short life, I knew she was not a burden. She was my only reason to keep breathing. Yes, I said, my voice steady with the resolve. I'll take her. The paperwork stretched into 6 long weeks. Temporary custody that grew permanent when Jason never reappeared to contest it. No phone calls, no birthday cards, no child support. It was as though he had been erased from existence. Those first years nearly broke me. I had forgotten the bone-deep exhaustion of caring for an infant. Nights blurred into dawns with endless feedings, teething cries, and the sharp edge of worry that never quite faded. Friends my age reveled in grandparenthood, indulging their grandchildren before handing them back at the end of the day. I lived in the trenches 24 hours a day. Yet Lily gave me more than fatigue. She gave me purpose. Even as a toddler, she burned with curiosity. While others clutched picture books, Lily pointed to real words, demanding to know their sounds. At 4, she rattled off simple sums with the ease of breathing. By 7, she devoured novels that belonged in a high school library. When her teacher, Mrs. Henderson, suggested testing, I wasn't surprised by the results. Lily wasn't just bright, she was profoundly gifted, with an IQ that placed her in the rarest percentile. Counselors recommended acceleration, elite programs, private tutoring. But what Lily needed most wasn't prestige. It was stability, the unshakable foundation of knowing she was safe and loved after losing everything so young. So we built a rhythm together. I worked part-time as a bookkeeper, a modest job that gave me enough flexibility for school pickups and tutoring appointments. Evenings became our sanctuary, reading aloud, solving puzzles, talking about everything from quantum physics to why people lie. The house filled with laughter, frustration, triumphs, and the comforting chaos of two people clinging to each other. The years slipped by faster than I could believe. The helpless infant left on my doorstep became a radiant young woman with a mind that soared beyond limits, but a heart that remained deeply kind. She was the greatest privilege of my life. And so when the envelope arrived 15 years later, summoning me to court against the man who had vanished without a trace, my hands shook. Every milestone on the walls of our home, every photo, every certificate, every memory stood as proof of a love that never wavered. Jason had left behind a burden. What he didn't understand was that the burden had become my greatest blessing. The early years tested every limit I thought I had. I was 52 with gray strands already creeping through my hair and joints that ached from the simplest of tasks, yet my world had shifted back to midnight, feedings, and diaper changes. Lily was relentless in her needs, a tiny creature whose cries pierced the silence of my nights, and whose laughter reminded me that joy could be reborn even in the ashes of grief. My friends teased me kindly, bringing over baby clothes and casseroles, but when they returned to their quiet homes, I remained in the trenches, mother again, whether I had asked for it or not. What kept me going was Lily herself. She was never ordinary, not even as a toddler. There was a sharpness in her gaze, a spark of awareness that seemed to drink in the world around her. By 2, she pointed at the words in her picture books, demanding to know their sounds. At 4, she rattled off simple sums while other children still struggled with counting. By 7, she was curled in an armchair with novels written for teenagers, her lips moving silently as she devoured worlds far older than her own. Teachers noticed, of course. During a parent-teacher conference, Mrs. Henderson leaned across her desk, her voice hushed with awe. "I've been teaching for 28 years, Mrs. Walker. I've never seen anything like Lily. Have you considered having her tested?" I had. Deep down, I already knew the truth. The tests confirmed it. Profoundly gifted. An IQ that placed her in the rarest tier of brilliance. The counselor's voice was matter-of-fact as she rattled off options. Accelerated programs, advanced tutoring, skipping grades. Yet all I could hear was Emily's voice echoing in memory, her laughter when she held Lily as a baby, the plans she never had the chance to fulfill. I understood what the experts did not. Genius could not heal grief. Stability mattered more than brilliance. Love mattered most of all. So I carved out a life that could hold her curiosity without stealing her childhood. I kept my part-time bookkeeping job at the local dental practice, a modest income that allowed me to keep the lights on while still picking her up from school and shepherding her to tutoring sessions. Nights became our refuge. We sat side by side, surrounded by stacks of books and puzzles, conversations drifting from quantum physics to the mysteries of human behavior. Her mind soared, but her laughter was what saved me. The house filled with scraps of her childhood, crayon drawings pinned to the fridge, science projects scattered across the kitchen table, sticky notes with her endless questions. Why do stars die? Why do people lie? Why does sadness feel heavy? Each note was a piece of her soul, and I kept them all, reminders of the miracle I'd been given when the world thought it had handed me only burden. Still, the exhaustion was real. At times, I wept quietly into my pillow, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility. Friends my age traveled, played with grandchildren for an afternoon, then returned to their freedom. My freedom had ended the night I found that note on Jason's counter. But each time Lily curled against me with a book in her lap or looked up with Emily's blue eyes, gratitude eclipsed fatigue. I wasn't just raising her, I was raising a second chance for everything grief had stolen. When she was 8, Lily asked about her mother. Children have a way of finding holes in the stories we tell them. I sat her on my lap, her long legs dangling awkwardly now, and told her about Emily, her laughter, her kindness, her fierce determination to become a nurse so she could help others. Lily listened with wide eyes, memorizing each word as though it were a secret code to her own existence. Then she asked the question I dreaded. What about my dad? I chose honesty, softened by compassion. Your father loved your mother once very much, but when she died, he wasn't strong enough to stay. Sometimes people break, Lily. Sometimes they choose themselves when they should choose the ones they love. She frowned, thoughtful in the way only she could be, and finally whispered, but you stayed. My throat tightened. Yes, sweetheart. I stayed. As the years slipped by, her gifts only sharpened. By 12, she was solving equations I couldn't begin to understand. Her notebooks filled with sketches of algorithms and abstract ideas. Teachers marveled. Neighbors shook their heads in amazement. But what filled me with the greatest pride was not her brilliance. It was her heart. She befriended the lonely, tutored the struggling, and shared her successes with a humility rare in children, rarer still in prodigies. We found a rhythm in our unusual life. School by day, projects by night, weekend trips to the library where she stacked books higher than she could carry. The world seemed limitless, and though money was tight, I found ways to keep her curiosity fed. She never knew how many nights I sat at the kitchen table balancing bills, praying that my paycheck would stretch far enough to cover her needs. She only knew that when she asked about the universe, I handed her a book. And when she doubted herself, I reminded her she was never too much, never too intense, never a burden. By the time she turned 15, she was no longer the tiny child I once lifted from a crib in despair. She was tall, with her mother's eyes and her father's dark hair, a young woman on the cusp of something extraordinary. I watched her move through the world with a grace and determination that took my breath away. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every fear that had gnawed at me in silence had led to this. A girl who had transformed tragedy into brilliance, who had become my family, my partner, my reason. I thought our battles were behind us. I thought the world had finally given us peace. But life is rarely so kind. The storm was coming, and though I could not yet see it, I felt it waiting just beyond the horizon. The restaurant lights glowed soft and golden, reflecting in Lily's eyes as she set her fork down with an expression that stilled my breath. 15 candles had just been blown out, laughter still lingered in the air, and yet I knew by the weight in her voice that something was about to change. Grandma, I need to tell you something, she said, her tone steady but laced with nerves. I smiled, trying to steady the sudden flutter in my chest. You know you can tell me anything, sweetheart. Her laptop had consumed her for months, her bedroom light burning long after I'd gone to bed. She had brushed off my questions with vague mentions of a school project, but that night the truth unfolded. Remember the app idea I told you about? The one to help kids with learning disabilities? I nodded. She had spoken with such passion about making education more accessible, ever since she'd tutored a classmate with dyslexia who struggled to keep up. I didn't just design it, she continued, her voice trembling with excitement. I built it, and Apple has accepted it into their beta program. For a moment, the clatter of dishes and low murmur of other diners faded into silence. What does that mean exactly, Bam? I asked, though I barely recognized my own voice. Her smile bloomed, brilliant and nervous all at once. It means they want to feature it in the App Store. And if it goes well, they'll discuss a licensing deal. My fork slipped from my hand, clattering against porcelain. My granddaughter, my 15-year-old granddaughter, had built something powerful enough to capture Apple's attention. I stared at her, torn between awe and disbelief. How did you even know how to build an app? She flushed, cheeks pink with pride. Mostly YouTube tutorials and online courses. And I got help from developers in a few forums when I hit walls. But it's mine, Grandma. All mine. The pride in her voice cracked me open. This was more than talent. This was resilience, courage, a determination she had carried like a torch since the day her world was shattered. Over dessert, she leaned closer, lowering her voice as if sharing a sacred secret. The licensing offer starts at $50,000. I nearly choked on my tiramisu. 50,000? Her eyes sparkled. That's just the beginning. If it scales the way they think, it could be much more. Dwayne, Grandma, this could change everything. For kids who learn differently, for us, for the future. That night, while she dreamed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My little girl, the baby who had once been left screaming in a crib surrounded by empty bottles, had built a bridge to a future brighter than I ever imagined. I had raised her with scraps of determination and love, and now she stood on the threshold of greatness. The weeks that followed blurred into a whirlwind. Lawyers' calls, meetings with Apple representatives, journalists clamoring to capture the story of the teen tech prodigy from a small town in Maine. Lily spoke with poise that stunned seasoned reporters, her brilliance tempered with humility. Still, I saw the exhaustion in her shoulders when the cameras turned off, the weight of expectations pressing harder with each headline. "Are you sure you want this kind of attention?" I asked one evening, her face lit by the glow of a screen as she wrapped up a video interview. "We could keep things quieter. Focus on your studies." Her gaze softened, so achingly familiar that I saw Emily in the curve of her smile. "Grandma, this isn't just about me. It's about kids who've been told they can't learn. If I can help them, if I can change even a small part of that, then I want to do this." What gay pride swelled so fierce it nearly broke me. My granddaughter wasn't only brilliant, she was brave. Brave enough to believe in something bigger than herself, brave enough to step into a spotlight that terrified even me. When the app launched, it roared to life. 10,000 downloads in the first day, featured in the education section within a week. By the end of the month, Lily Walker was the youngest developer to land a seven-figure licensing deal with Apple. The quiet rhythm of our lives fractured into a blur of interviews, podcasts, photographs, and headlines. CNN called next. Sarah Martinez, warm-voiced and persuasive, promised a segment for their Young Innovator series. "We want to highlight Lily's story, the brilliance, the perseverance, and of course, the grandmother who raised her." I should have insisted on more control, on vetting every question, but pride made me blind. The cameras arrived, turning our modest living room into a studio. Lily sat in her new blue sweater, her voice clear and sure as she explained her passion for accessible education. I watched her shine, heart full and aching. Then Sarah turned to me. "Maggie, tell us about raising Lily on your own. It must have been challenging, recognizing and nurturing her gifts." "It was the greatest privilege of my life," I answered honestly, my throat tight with love. But Sarah wasn't finished. "And her parents, I understand they were not in the picture." The question sliced open an old wound. I answered carefully. "Her mother, my daughter Emily, passed away when Lily was an infant. Since then, it's been just the two of us." "And her father," Sarah pressed. I felt Lily stiffen beside me. "He wasn't able to care for her after Emily died," I said, firm and final. "It was better for everyone that I raised her." Sarah's gaze sharpened. "So he abandoned her?" The word exploded in the room. Abandoned. We had never spoken it aloud, though it was the truth. Lily's face faltered, a crack in her composure. I cut the interview short, but I knew damage had been done. 2 weeks later, the segment aired. While it celebrated Lily's brilliance, it lingered on the tragic backstory of the abandoned child raised by a heroic grandmother. The calls began soon after. "Mrs. Walker," a man's voice said over the phone. "This is David Chen, attorney with Miller, Santos and Associates. I represent Jason Walker in a custody petition regarding his daughter, Lily." The words turned my blood to ice. After 15 silent years, Jason had come back, and he wanted her. This was only the beginning of a battle that could tear us apart. If you're still here with us, following Lily's journey, don't forget to hold on, because the storm that's coming will test every bond we've ever built. Stay close, share our story, and don't miss what comes next. Jason's return began with a phone call, but it quickly turned into a storm that swallowed every corner of our lives. The lawyer's voice had been smooth, almost rehearsed, as he explained Jason's renewed interest in Lily. He spoke of healing, of sobriety, of stability, weaving a narrative so carefully crafted it sounded almost believable. But I knew better. The man who had vanished into silence for 15 years had not returned for love. He had returned because Lily was valuable now. The petition arrived by courier a week later. Heavy paper, embossed seal, legal language that stripped the heart out of the truth. He wanted custody. He wanted her. I sat across the table from Margaret Winters, the attorney I had hired, her sharp eyes fixed on me as she tapped the papers with her pen. "I'll be direct," she said. "This is going to be difficult. He's the biological father, which gives him standing, and his lawyers are already framing the narrative in his favor." Her words landed like stones. I had raised Lily through every scraped knee, every midnight fever, every triumph and heartbreak. Yet here I was being told that biology carried more weight than love. "They're calling it temporary incapacity," Margaret continued, her tone edged with disdain. "That his disappearance wasn't abandonment, but a grieving father stepping aside so his child could be cared for by a stable relative. They'll paint him as selfless, not selfish." I clenched my hands in my lap, nails digging into my skin. He left her with a note calling her a burden. Margaret leaned forward, her silver hair catching the light. "We'll use that, but you should know they'll counter by accusing you of alienation, of keeping Lily from her father, preventing contact, maybe even hiding her." The accusation stung. "That's a lie. He never tried to reach us." "Can you prove it?" I shook my head, my throat tight. Margaret sighed softly and made a note. "Then we'll rely on the evidence we do have. 15 years of care, school records, witnesses who can testify to Lily's success under your guardianship. And most importantly, Lily herself. At 15, her voice carries weight in court. When the first hearing came, the courthouse felt like another world. Marble floors gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, footsteps echoing like thunder. Lily walked beside me, her navy dress too grown up, her posture too steady for a girl her age. She held a folder of documents against her chest, her knuckles white. "You okay?" I whispered. She nodded, but I saw the tension in her shoulders. "Just nervous. I've never seen him before. Not since I was a baby." Before I could answer, Margaret appeared at my side. "They're here." I turned and saw him, Jason Walker. At 37, he looked like a stranger dressed in a familiar body. His suit was tailored, his hair carefully styled, his face smooth and confident. He carried himself with the ease of someone used to getting what he wanted. For a moment, when his eyes landed on Lily, I saw something flicker. Shock, maybe even emotion. But then his gaze shifted to me and all softness disappeared. "That's him," Lily whispered, her voice tight. "That's my father." Inside the courtroom, we sat at the plaintiff's table. Jason and his legal team settled across from us, their polished shoes tapping against the floor. Judge Harrison, stern and composed, called the hearing to order. Jason's attorney, David Chen, stood first. He painted a portrait of a man broken by tragedy, too young to cope, who had made the painful but noble choice to step aside for his daughter's sake. He spoke of rehabilitation, sobriety, education, and success. He described Jason as a man reborn, married now to a woman with a background in teaching, financially stable, ready to provide the life his daughter deserved. "Meanwhile," Chen said with practiced regret, "Miss Walker, though devoted, is 67, living on a limited income. She cannot offer Lily the educational opportunities or financial security her father can. Our client asks only for the chance to fulfill his role as parent, to give his daughter the future she deserves." Jason sat with his head bowed, hands folded neatly in front of him, the picture of humility. But I remembered the note on the counter. I remembered the crib with a screaming baby left unattended. His performance was theater, and I wanted to scream through the silence. When Margaret rose, the air shifted. She walked with measured steps, her presence commanding despite her small frame. "Your Honor," she began, "my client has raised Lily Walker since she was 6 months old. Not for a season, not temporarily, 15 years. In that time, Jason Walker did not make one phone call, send one birthday card, or provide 1 cent of support. He did not visit her when she was hospitalized at age 3. He did not stand in the crowd when she won the state science fair at 12. He did not hold her hand when she learned to drive. He abandoned her. Oh. Her words rang through the courtroom, sharp as glass. She placed a thick folder on the table, each page a record of a life lived without him. What Mr. Walker sees now is not a child in need, but a young woman who has become successful, valuable, profitable. His sudden interest is not parental devotion. It is opportunism disguised as love. I felt Jason's eyes burn into me, but Margaret's voice grew stronger, unwavering. This case is not about financial security. It is about emotional stability, about love, about the bond between a girl and the grandmother who chose her when no one else did. Lily Walker is not a prize to be won. She is a child who deserves to remain where she has always been, safe, loved, and thriving. Judge Harrison listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. She finally raised her gaze from the papers before her. This is a complex matter with compelling arguments on both sides. Before I make any preliminary decisions, I want to hear from the minor child. My heart nearly stopped as Lily rose to her feet. Her footsteps were soft against the polished floor as she walked toward the bench, her head held high, her expression both fragile and fierce. In that moment, she looked so much like Emily that my chest ached with longing. She turned to face the judge, her voice clear, steady. Your Honor, my grandmother saved my life. She didn't just take me in. She believed in me every single day for 15 years. Everything good about who I am comes from her. Her words filled the room, quiet but undeniable. Jason shifted in his chair, his confidence flickering. For the first time, I saw a crack in his polished mask. And in that moment, I realized the battle had only just begun. The first time Lily returned from a supervised visit with Jason, her expression unsettled me more than any argument his lawyers could have made. She looked both fascinated and uncertain, as if she had glimpsed a door she wasn't sure she wanted to open. He told me stories about Mom, she said softly as we drove home. Things I never knew. How they met, their first date, the way she laughed when she was nervous. The ache in my chest was sharp and immediate. Of course he would use Emily. He was giving Lily what I could never give her, memories of her mother through someone else's eyes. That night, as I tucked her in, she whispered, "He seems proud of me, Grandma. Like, really proud." I kissed her forehead, hiding the storm raging inside me. Proud because she was worth something now. Proud because she had become the daughter of a tech prodigy, not just a little girl in need of diapers and milk. Over the next weeks, the visits grew longer. Jason requested Saturdays, then overnight stays with Susan, his polished new wife who always seemed ready with warm smiles and well-timed encouragement. Lily came home glowing with stories of their spacious house, their fast internet, their promises of private tutors and full tuition for MIT or Stanford. I listened quietly, but every word felt rehearsed, as if fed to her with careful precision. At dinner one evening, she set down her fork and looked at me, her blue eyes full of hesitant determination. "Grandma, Jake mentioned you'll retire soon. What happens to my college fund when that happens?" The meatloaf on my plate turned to ash in my mouth. "What do you mean, sweetheart? I've been saving for you since you were a baby." "I know," she said quickly, "and I'm grateful. But realistically, your savings plus scholarships might only cover undergrad." He says he could pay for everything, even a PhD if I wanted. The air between us thickened. "Is that what he suggested you ask me?" Her cheeks flushed, and she looked down. "We were just talking about practical things. He's good with financial planning. It's his job." Practical things. The words cut deeper than they should have. I had given her my life, every sacrifice measured in sleepless nights, imbalanced checkbooks. Now she was weighing me against promises of opportunity. The following weekend, she packed a small bag for her first overnight. I stood in the doorway, watching her fold clothes into the backpack she had carried since middle school. "It's just one night," she said, though she avoided my eyes. "I know," I whispered. "Just be careful." "Careful of what? He's my father." "He's a stranger who happens to share your DNA," I said gently. "That's not the same as being family." Her eyes flashed with something sharp, something I had never seen directed at me before. "Maybe the reason he stayed away was because he knew you'd never give him a chance." The words hung like a blade between us. My throat closed, but I forced myself to stay calm. Or maybe he stayed away because he was a coward. She grabbed her bag and left with Carol, the court-appointed supervisor, leaving me in the silence of our home with a hollow fear I couldn't shake. When she came back Sunday evening, her steps felt heavier, yet her expression carried a new confidence. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, folding her hands neatly. "We need to talk," she said, her voice too formal for 15. "About what?" I asked. "About my future. About what's best for everyone." Every syllable sounded rehearsed. This wasn't my Lily speaking. This was Jason's voice echoing through her. "They want me to come live with them, not forever, just to see how it goes, for the rest of the school year." The room tilted. "And what did you tell them?" "That I'd think about it." I stared at her, the girl I had raised from infancy, and realized Jason Walker was far more dangerous than I had allowed myself to believe. He wasn't just offering her financial stability. He was offering her a fantasy, a perfect family with two parents, a safe house, and a future paved with promises. He was rewriting her story, pulling her piece by piece away from me. "Lily," I said carefully, "do you remember what you told the judge? That your home was with me?" She hesitated. "I remember, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe it's time for me to know my real family." Real family. The word struck harder than any gavel. For the first time in 15 years, I felt the grip of fear that maybe I was already losing her, not in court, but in her heart. That night, I sat in the quiet, staring at the photographs on our walls. Every certificate, every drawing, every memory testified to our life together. Yet Jason was chipping away at them, brick by brick, with money, promises, and stories I couldn't compete with. The knock on the door came a few days later, sharp against the silence. When I opened it, Margaret stood on my porch, her face grim. "We need to talk," she said, stepping inside. In the living room, she didn't waste time. "I got a call from opposing counsel. They're pushing for a full custody hearing next month." "Why so soon?" My voice cracked. Her eyes were heavy. "Because they think they're winning. And based on what I've heard from the social worker, they might be right. Lily seems genuinely happy during her visits. She's mentioned feeling guilty about being a financial burden to you." The phrase sliced through me. Jason's poison had rooted itself in her heart. Margaret leaned forward, lowering her voice. "There's something about this case that doesn't add up. The timing is too perfect, the strategy too polished. Maggie, I think someone has been planning this for a while. The question is, how long has Jason known about Lily's success? And why now?" Her words sent a chill racing down my spine. If Jason had been watching us, waiting for his chance, then this wasn't just about custody. It was about control. And for the first time in years, I felt the ground beneath me begin to tremble. If you're still walking this road with us, don't look away now. The fight ahead will be darker, sharper, and more dangerous than anything we've faced yet. Stay with me, because the truth is only beginning to surface. The discovery struck me like lightning. Jason wasn't just some opportunist who had stumbled across Lily's story on television. He was working inside Apple, in the very department that had overseen her app's approval. The realization left my hands shaking as I printed pages of evidence, each one more damning than the last. Employment records, press releases, buried mentions in industry reports. He had been watching her for months, maybe longer. He hadn't come back out of love. He had come back because she was worth millions. Margaret listened carefully as I laid out the proof. Her expression hardened, lines deepening around her mouth. "This changes everything," she said quietly. "If we can show he manipulated the process or leveraged inside information for personal gain, it doesn't just undermine his custody case. It could expose him to fraud." Hope flickered in my chest for the first time in weeks, fragile but alive. Maybe the truth would be enough. When the day of the hearing arrived, the courthouse felt charged, humming with tension that made my skin crawl. Jason sat at the defense table in a navy suit, his confidence polished to perfection. His lawyers whispered around him, flipping through binders as though the outcome was already secure. Behind him sat Susan, her smile steady, her presence calculated to project warmth and stability. Lily sat beside me, her posture tense, her expression unreadable. David Chen opened with practiced eloquence, painting me as a woman who had poisoned a child against her father. He called it parental alienation, argued that I had denied Jason contact, created a narrative of abandonment that was never truly accurate. Jason, he insisted, had spent 15 years building himself into the kind of man who could finally step into his rightful role. Chen's words dripped with conviction, and I felt Lily stiffen beside me. When Margaret rose, the weight of the room shifted. Her voice was calm, deliberate, every word sharpened to a blade. She laid out the facts. Jason's employment at Apple, his role in the educational technology division, his documented involvement in reviewing Lily's app. Piece by piece, she revealed the paper trail of a man who hadn't simply rediscovered his daughter by chance. He had tracked her, studied her, and timed his return with ruthless precision. "This is not a father reclaiming his child," Margaret said, her eyes locked on the judge. "This is a man who abandoned his infant, only to return when she became profitable. This isn't about love, it's about acquisition." Jason's face paled, his jaw tightening as his attorney leapt to object. Judge Harrison allowed the evidence to stand. The silence in the courtroom was thick as Margaret stacked document after document on the table, proof of his access to proprietary information, proof that he had known exactly who Lily was long before the first news story aired. Jason himself took the stand, and the performance he gave might have swayed anyone who hadn't lived through his betrayal. His voice cracked at the right moments, steady at others, weaving regret into every phrase. He admitted to knowing about the app during its approval, but claimed it was then, seeing her brilliance, that he realized the enormity of his mistake. He swore he had not profited from inside knowledge, that he had not manipulated outcomes. He looked at Lily when he spoke, his eyes soft with carefully measured sorrow. "Your Honor," he said, "I left because I was broken. I stayed away because I believed she deserved stability I couldn't give. But I am here now. I am sober. I am strong. And I want to give my daughter the opportunities she deserves, not because of her success, but because she is my child. I want to be the father she needs." The words hung heavy in the air. I felt Lily watching him, her gaze sharp, conflicted. For a moment, I feared she might believe him. Margaret rose again for cross-examination. She pressed him on the timeline on why he waited until her app had already gained traction before filing for custody. She showed internal records proving he had been monitoring her work for over a year before stepping forward. His answers faltered, his composure strained, though he never fully broke. The courtroom heard from witnesses next, teachers, neighbors, friends, each one attesting to the life Lily and I had built together. They spoke of her brilliance, yes, but also of her kindness, her stability, her joy. They spoke of me, the grandmother who had sat through every conference, who had worked late nights to pay for tutors, who had shown up every time it mattered. Their words wrapped around me like armor, though fear still gnawed at the edges. Finally, it was Lily's turn. She rose slowly, her navy dress brushing against the wooden bench as she stepped forward. Judge Harrison's tone softened. "Miss Walker, you are old enough that your voice matters here. Tell us what you want." The room held its breath as my granddaughter stood at the center of the storm. She glanced at me, then at Jason, her expression a mirror of Emily's stubborn strength. "My grandmother saved my life," she said clearly. "Not just when she took me in, but every single day since. She believed in me, fought for me, and loved me when no one else did. Everything I am comes from her." Tears stung my eyes, but I kept still as she turned to her father. "I am curious about him. I want to know who he is, why he left, what kind of person he really is. But I don't understand how someone can disappear for 15 years and then suddenly decide to be a parent." Judge Harrison considered her words, then spoke carefully. "I am ordering supervised visitation, 2 hours each Saturday for the next month. We will reconvene in 30 days to reassess." The gavel fell, and the room erupted into movement. Jason approached us in the hallway, his gaze fixed on Lily. "You look so much like your mother," he murmured. Lily studied him, her tone almost clinical. "I don't remember you at all." "I know," he said softly. "And I'm sorry. I'd like a chance to explain, if you'll let me." She lifted her chin, her voice steady. "The court says I have to spend time with you anyway. so I guess we'll see. But when we walked away, I saw something in her eyes that unsettled me more than anything else. Curiosity. The same fierce curiosity that made her brilliant was now turned toward the man who had once abandoned her, and I feared that curiosity might be the crack he needed to slip back into her life. The first supervised visit felt like walking into enemy territory. The sterile room inside the family center buzzed faintly with fluorescent lights, its walls painted with cheerful murals that only made the tension sharper. Lily sat across from Jason at a low wooden table, a stack of board games between them like a barrier. "Hi, Lily," he said gently, his voice carefully measured. She looked at him steadily, her hands folded in her lap. "Hello." It was the first time I had seen them speak, but without the insulation of a courtroom. Jason leaned forward, choosing his words with the precision of a man who knew he had to win her trust. He asked about school, about her app, about her favorite books. Slowly she began to answer, not warmly, but not coldly either. Each reply was short, cautious, as if she were testing the air. The supervisor, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, watched quietly from her corner. I sat further back, my heart pounding with every word exchanged. I had fought so hard to protect Lily from this man, and now I was forced to watch her curiosity bloom in real time. On the drive home, she was unusually quiet. Finally, she whispered, "He's not what I expected. He's calmer, kinder." I gripped the steering wheel. "People can act kind for 2 hours, sweetheart. What matters is who they were when no one was watching." She frowned, gazing out the window. Still, he knew things about Mom. He remembered her laugh, the way she always sang when she cooked. "You don't sing, Grandma. I didn't know that about her." The words pierced me. Of course she would hunger for pieces of Emily, and Jason had them to give. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, a knot of fear twisting in my chest. I was losing ground. Each visit chipped away at the wall between them. Jason arrived with small gifts, books, puzzles, gadgets, all carefully chosen to appeal to her mind. Patricia noted that he was attentive, respectful, appropriate. Lily came home carrying his stories like treasures, testing them against the memories she had built with me. One Saturday, after another session, she turned to me with wide, uncertain eyes. "Grandma, what if he really has changed?" I wanted to scream. He hasn't. I wanted to remind her of the note, the crib, the silence that had stretched across her childhood. But her voice was so hopeful, so tentative, that I couldn't bring myself to crush it. Instead, I said softly, "Then he'll have to prove it over time. Not with gifts, not with promises, with consistency." The 30-day review came swiftly. Judge Harrison listened to Patricia's neutral report, her tone unreadable as always. Jason's attorneys argued for extended visitation. Margaret countered with evidence of manipulation, reminding the court of his suspicious timing and hidden motives. Then Lily was asked to speak. She rose, her hands trembling slightly, and for the first time I saw her torn. "I love my grandmother," she said firmly. "She's the reason I'm who I am. But I also want to know my father. I think I deserve the chance to see if he's really different now." The words nearly broke me. The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Very well. I'm granting supervised visitation for 3 more months, with the possibility of transitioning to unsupervised weekends if the progress continues." My breath caught, and Jason's eyes flicked toward me, triumph hidden in his calm expression. That night, Lily sat at the kitchen table, tracing circles on the wood grain with her fingertip. "I don't want you to feel like I'm replacing you, Grandma. I need to know where I come from." Tears stung my eyes. "You come from love, Lily. From your mother? From me. But I understand. I can't stop you from wanting answers." She reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "You'll always be my home. That won't change." Her words comforted me, but deep inside I felt the foundation shifting. Jason was patient, strategic, and he had found the one vulnerability I couldn't protect her from, the longing for a father. And as the weeks unfolded, I saw the change in her. She laughed more easily when talking about him. She repeated his advice, his anecdotes, as if testing them against her own truths. He was slipping into her world, thread by thread, weaving himself into her narrative. I knew then that this wasn't just a legal battle. It was a battle for her heart. If you've been holding on through our story, don't let go now. The final stretch is coming, and with it, the choices that could shatter everything we fought for. Stay with me, because the darkest night is still ahead. The shift came slowly, almost invisibly, until one evening I realized the balance had changed. Lily returned from her supervised visit with a new kind of light in her eyes, the kind I hadn't seen since her APA first launched. She spoke about Jason as though he were no longer a stranger. He remembered the lullaby Mom used to sing, she said softly, as if sharing something sacred. He hummed it for me. I didn't even know it existed. I forced a smile, but inside, grief clawed at me. Emily's memory belonged to me too, yet Jason had stolen even that moment, offering it to Lily as if it were a gift only he could give. By midsummer, the hearings grew more tense. Jason's lawyers pushed for unsupervised visits, and though Margaret fought fiercely, Judge Harrison finally agreed to limited overnight stays, 1 weekend a month. My protest fell into the silence of the gavel, and I watched Lily's face light up with anticipation. The first weekend she packed carefully, choosing her favorite books, her laptop, and a sweater Emily had once knitted. As I drove her to Jason's house, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles burned white. His home was immaculate, a sprawling suburban house with trimmed hedges and polished shutters. Susan waited on the porch, her smile gracious, her posture welcoming. Lily rushed forward without hesitation, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt the sting of being left behind. That night, the house echoed with silence. No laughter drifting down the hallway, no sound of typing keys or music leaking from Lily's bedroom. I sat in the living room, staring at her photographs on the wall, my chest hollow. I had prayed for peace for so long, but I had not realized how painful peace could be when it came in the form of absence. Sunday evening, she returned brimming with stories. They had cooked dinner together. Jason had shown her old photographs of Emily. They had walked through the park where he claimed to have pushed her stroller as a baby. She spoke with wonder, her words tumbling over one another, desperate to share. I listened, nodding, my throat tight. Every story was another thread tying her closer to him. Over the next weeks, the pattern continued. Each visit wove Jason deeper into her life. She repeated his advice, quoting him as though his words carried more weight than mine. She began to compare his car, his house, his resources, unto our small home and modest life. She never said it directly, but I could feel it. The scale was tipping. Margaret warned me during one late-night phone call. He's playing the long game, Maggie. He's patient and he's smart. The more time she spends with him, the more normal it will feel. Courts often favor reunification when the child is receptive. Receptive. The word lingered like poison. Lily was not just receptive. She was open, eager, hungry for the pieces of her identity only Jason could provide. One evening after dinner, she looked at me across the table. Grandma, if the judge asked me tomorrow where I wanted to live, I don't know what I'd say. The confession split me open. You don't have to decide right now, I said gently, even as my chest burned. But what if I'm hurting you by wanting to know him? She asked, her voice fragile. You could never hurt me by wanting the truth, I whispered. I just don't want him to rewrite it. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. Sometimes I think I have two lives. One with you, built on everything you've given me, and one I could have had with him if he hadn't left. And I don't know which one belongs to me anymore. I reached across the table, taking her hand. Both belong to you, but only one was real, and that's the one we lived together. Still, I knew my words were not enough. The battle had moved beyond legal filings and hearings. It was now waged inside her heart, a place I could not fully reach. The final hearing was scheduled for September. Margaret prepared meticulously, gathering every witness, every record, every scrap of evidence that told our story. Jason's team prepared just as fiercely, polishing his image, framing his absence as noble sacrifice. On the morning of the trial, Lily dressed in a navy skirt and white blouse, her hair tied back neatly. She looked older than her years, carrying herself with the solemnity of someone preparing for judgment. In the mirror, I caught a glimpse of Emily at 15, determined, vulnerable, radiant. We walked into the courthouse together, our footsteps echoing against the marble floor. Jason was already there, shaking hands with his lawyers, his posture calm, his confidence unshaken. He glanced at Lily, and for a moment I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not triumph, but desperation. The courtroom filled with voices, shuffling papers, the heavy scent of tension. Judge Harrison entered, her gavel calling us to order. This was it, the moment everything balanced on. Margaret leaned close to me, her whisper steady. Whatever happens, remember this. She knows the truth. She knows who stood by her every single day. I nodded, though my heart pounded so fiercely I thought it might break through my chest. As the hearing began, I looked at Lily beside me, her face pale but steady. She had become more than I ever dreamed she could be. Brilliant, resilient. And now in this courtroom she would have to choose between two worlds. The one I had built with love and the one Jason was offering with promises. And in that silence before testimony began, I realized I was terrified of which world she would choose. The silence before the verdict was a silence that carved through bone. I sat with Lily's hand in mine, the courtroom a blur of wood and shadow, every breath heavy as stone. Judge Harrison's expression gave nothing away, her gavel resting in her palm like the weight of fate itself. Jason had spoken with practiced remorse, weaving a portrait of redemption. His lawyers framed his absence as a tragic necessity, his return as a triumph of love. They painted me as a woman clinging to control, too old to offer the future Lily deserved. Margaret countered with every truth we had. The abandonment, the note, the years of silence, the paper trail of Jason's calculated reappearance. She reminded the court of Lily's achievements, her stability, her happiness in my care. She spoke with fire, but I knew it was not Margaret's voice that mattered most. It was Lily's. When she rose to testify, the room seemed to hold its breath. She stood tall, her voice steady, her eyes unflinching. I don't remember my father, she began, her gaze flicking briefly to Jason. I remember the note my grandmother spoke, the one that said I was a burden. She never hid it from me. She wanted me to know the truth. I know he's here now, and maybe he's changed, but for 15 years he wasn't. For 15 years he chose not to be. Her words struck like a blade. Jason's face tightened, his composure cracking for the first time. My grandmother didn't just raise me, Lily continued, her voice stronger now. She built me. Every late night, every scraped knee, every project, every dream, I am who I am because of her. I'm grateful that my father wants to know me now, but I don't want to live with him. My home is with her. It always has been. Tears blurred my vision, but I held still, letting her voice carry. It was Emily's voice I heard in her tone, strong and unshakable. Judge Harrison listened intently, her gaze moving between Jason, Margaret, and me. At last, she lifted her gavel. The court recognizes that Jason Walker has demonstrated personal growth and stability. However, this case is not about potential. It is about history, bond, and the child's best interest. Custody remains with Marcia Walker. Jason Walker will retain visitation rights, supervised until further notice. The gavel fell. The sound was final, resonant, a bell tolling the end of the war. Relief crashed over me so violently I nearly wept aloud. Jason sat motionless, his jaw clenched, his eyes on Lily as if trying to hold her with sheer force. But she did not look back. She slipped her hand into mine, her grip firm, her decision made. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters shouted, microphones thrust toward us. Lily kept her head high, her voice steady as she answered. I love my grandmother. She's my home. That's all I have to say. We left the noise behind, walking together through the crisp September air. My heart ached with exhaustion, but also with a fierce, unshakable pride. She had spoken her truth, and the world had heard it. That night, we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she had once asked if she was a burden. She reached across, her fingers warm against mine. Grandma, she said softly, I was never choosing between you and him. I was choosing myself, and I chose the life we built together. I pressed her hand to my lips, my tears falling freely now. You were never my burden, Lily. You were my salvation. For the first time in months, peace settled in my chest. Jason would always be a shadow on the edge of our lives, but he no longer had power to rewrite our story. We had faced him, we had endured, and we had won. The storm had passed, and in its wake stood a young woman with her mother's eyes and her own unshakable strength, a girl who had turned tragedy into triumph, who had been my greatest blessing all along. And as I looked at her, I knew one truth more certain than any court's ruling. Love had carried us through, and love would carry us still. To everyone who has walked beside us through this journey, let our story be a reminder. Love is stronger than blood, stronger than betrayal, stronger than the storms life throws against us. A parent is not defined by DNA, but by presence, sacrifice, and devotion. If this story touched you, share it so others may find strength in it too. Subscribe, stay with us, and never forget, family is built by love, not by chance.